What's good, guys? Fantasy Joe back here with my pre-NFL Draft 2022 wide receiver rankings. Obviously, these rankings will change a ton post-draft, so make sure to hit that subscribe button to stick around for all of those rankings that I will give to you, especially with the draft order this year, with the Packers and the Chiefs having so much draft capital and so much need for receivers at the end of the draft. Um, and the talent being so spread out in this draft. Whoever they go to could very well be the number one wide receiver being taken in this draft. Um, so yeah, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section down below. Check out my NFL Draft RB rankings as well, and stick around for more content. And like I said, my post uh, draft dynasty rankings. Stick around for those as well. Without further ado, let's hop into my number 8 receiver, Christian Watson, wide receiver from North Dakota State. You can see from his last year, he's a big receiver, 43 receptions, 800 yards, good for 18.6 per catch, 7 touchdowns. Absolutely dominated his competition level. Obviously, at North Dakota State, it wasn't very good competition, but if you have to dominate the competition you go against, and he absolutely did that, as well as showing up and posting awesome numbers at the NFL Combine. 6'4", 208 pounds, big hands, um, 4.36 in the 40-yard dash, which is absolutely flying for a 6'4" wide receiver. Then you look at his vertical jump, 38.5, and broad jump, 136. You'll see these are the highest numbers of any of the receivers we're going to talk about. The explosiveness for this kid is out of this world, and that's why I think an NFL team will probably take a chance at him at the end of the first round or very early in the second round. So yeah, he could very well end up being, if he goes to the Chiefs, end up being a top 3 receiver in this class, could end up being the best receiver in this class. Who knows by the time it's all said and done, but he certainly has the talent. That's why people are talking about him as a first round wide receiver. This brings us to our number 7 receiver in this class, Jahan Dotson. Honestly, this is a late move I made, putting Jahan Dotson at 7. Really love his tape, to be honest with you. Was a big time producer at Penn State. You can see his last year, 91 receptions, 1,100 yards, 12 touchdowns. Was a guy that, every game Penn State was trying to put the ball in his hands because he's a big-time playmaker. Had over 888 yards in his junior season as well. Not an early declare, which you do like to see at the wide receiver position, but you look at his combine, solid numbers, 4.43 in the 40, 36 vertical, 121 inch broad jump. Very good numbers. Gets over the 30-inch mark, which is good. A little undersized, but that's really the only con I feel like when you talk about his game. If he was 6'1", he'd probably be easily a first-round receiver. He's not, though, but I think he's a guy who can come in and produce right away as a rookie. He's really good. I liked his tape. I think he's a good route runner, not a great route runner, but that's something, he can work on as he gets to the NFL level. Would not surprise me at all if he ends up being one of the best receivers in this class if he goes to the right team. Moving on to our number 6 receiver, George Pickens is our number 6 receiver. George Pickens, wide receiver out of Georgia, got hurt while he's at Georgia. Really, the only season that he got, we really got to see him was his freshman year. But he had a really good year there for a freshman. There's 49 receptions, 727 yards, and 8 touchdowns as a freshman. It's pretty awesome. And then, when you watch the tape, he leaps off the tape. You can really just tell this guy is a baller. He has the size. If it wasn't for a few injuries, I think he is easily a first-round pick. I think he is a first-round pick. Probably will end up being, when you look at the Chiefs and the Packers both having those 2 first-round picks at the end, I think someone will end up taking a pick on him. If not, I think he'll be a top 40 selection. When you look at him, 6'3", 4.47, 33-inch vertical, 125-inch broad jump, and makes plays on the ball in the SEC from a young age. I think that's something that people are going to take, especially when you look at the teams at the back end of the draft. I love George Pickens' film. I think if he can stay healthy, he could be the best wide receiver in this draft class when it's all said and done, potentially. My number 5 receiver is Treylon Burks from Arkansas. Treylon Burks was a stud, especially his last season at Arkansas. 12 games, 66 receptions, 1,100 yards, good for 16.7 yards per catch. You see it every year in college. He was over 16 yards per reception, 11 receiving touchdowns his last year, had a solid sophomore year as well, over 800 yards, 7 touchdowns. Treylon Burks was an explosive player in his time at Arkansas. A lot of people have been comparing him, as a Deebo Samuel-esque player, a guy you can get the ball to in multiple ways and let him just go create. His combine numbers were slightly underwhelming, I think, for what people were hoping for. But I think here's what you have to keep in mind with that 4.55 40-yard dash. He is 225, 33-inch vertical, 122-inch broad jump. Aren't bad numbers, a little pedestrian for a wide receiver, but not bad by any means. And like I said, he produced at a high level in the SEC. I think that is what will make him end up being a first-round pick. And I think he's a guy, I think people are just overrating the combine a little bit too much. When you watch the film, he's a guy who, sure, he isn't a refined route runner, but that's something, you can learn, that you can get better at. He is a guy who can make plays, but be it, catching the ball or on a jet sweep. And that over 16 yards per catch gives me a lot of hope for him as an NFL receiver. Although I think, the Deebo Samuel comparisons, Deebo Samuel last year in the NFL averaged 18.2 yards per reception. So just keep that in mind when we're comparing these guys to established NFL stars. It's best case scenario potentially. But I think he's a guy who can, do some similar things. But, I'm not saying he's going to be effective as Deebo Samuel was last season by any means. Number 4 receiver from Ohio State, Garrett Wilson. I'm not as high as Garrett Wilson as everyone else is. Some people have Garrett Wilson as their number 1 receiver in his class. I can certainly understand it. His last year at Ohio State, 70 receptions, 1,058 yards, 15.1 per catch, 12 touchdowns. Great year. Produced as a sophomore as well, over 700 yards, 6 touchdowns. See explosive yards per catch as well. Produced a little bit in the rushing game as well. Not a ton of usage, but still a lot of production. And then when we look at his combine profile, you see the explosive numbers there. 4.38 in the 40, 36 in the vertical, 123-inch broad jump. The reason that I still have some pause on Garrett Wilson, although I do think he's a great player and definitely can develop into an even better player. Some people are comparing him to Odell Beckham Jr. What gives me pause, though, is he looks like a little bit of a 16-year-old in a really nice car. In a sports car, he doesn't know exactly how to drive it yet. He is not a refined route runner. He can separate. He can make people miss, most certainly. You see that he is a jitterbug on tape. Yeah, has both that ability and could develop into an excellent route runner, but he is not there yet. The guy that I have rated ahead of him, you'll see in a second, number 3, is there as a route runner, and so that's the difference to me. But he did produce in college in the Big Ten. I still think he will be a good NFL player and could very well be the best receiver in his draft class. I just think he needs a little bit of time before he's going to be a featured receiver in the NFL. As far as running the entire route tree. If he goes to a good quarterback, though, there's no reason that he can't, have 1,000+ yards as a rookie. Especially, you become a pro. By the time he steps on the NFL field, he could already have mastered a bunch of these route running things. He's still a young player. Going to be coached, to a level that he hasn't been before. So it's not so much that I dislike Garrett Wilson. It's just this is really a good draft class, and you have to kind of nitpick on some of these guys for some little things here. Moving on to number 3. My number 3 receiver, Chris Olave, out of Ohio State. The reason I view him and Garrett Wilson very similarly. I think Garrett Wilson has a higher ceiling than the Chris Olave, but I think Chris Olave is more NFL ready, one of the most NFL ready players in this entire draft class. Looking at his stats, 65 receptions, 936 yards, 13 touchdowns. Had a great sophomore season as well. You see 840 yards, 12 touchdowns. Solid junior season as well. Not an early declare, but could have come out last year and been probably a first-round receiver as well. So keep that in mind as when it comes to Olave. But then here's what really stood out to me besides the tape, the fact that he came in and ran a 4.39. A little less explosive than Wilson with a vertical 32, broad jump 124, but still a little bit average in those numbers for a receiver, but the speed is really nice. And when you watch the tape, he is so smooth, crisp routes. He's going to be able to get open in the NFL right away, and has the speed to beat you deep and do things with the ball in his hands already. I think he's a guy who will excel at the NFL level, especially if he lands with a big-time quarterback who can put the ball on him when he breaks out of these routes. Would not be surprised at all if he has 1,000 yards in his rookie year if he lands in a good situation. The next two guys I have did not participate in the NFL Combine. Number 2, Drake London, wide receiver from USC. Thank you for loading. You can see he's a 6'4" wide receiver. I think at the NFL Combine, that's what he measured in at, right around 220 pounds. Look at his junior season at USC: 88 receptions, 1,084 yards, 7 touchdowns. Got injured at the end of that season, but still was averaging 11 receptions, 136 yards per game. Absolutely dominating for USC. When you watch the tape, I think the thing that stood out to me about Drake London that I really liked was, sure, he's a big receiver who can make contested catches, makes a lot of them. He's very good at making the contested catches, but he's a limber. He can run good routes as it is. I think he can continue to develop as a route runner. Usually, when you see wide receivers as big as him, you don't think they're ever going to be able to, really run refined routes. I'm not saying he'll be, a Chris Olave level route runner ever, but he has good feet in order to separate and doesn't necessarily have the overall explosiveness, but since he has that great contested catch ability and route running ability, I think will be a success at the NFL level. And really, if it wasn't for this number 1 player on my list being so electric, I think he would be a great number 1 any other year in most draft classes. I wouldn't say the last 2 draft classes, though, just because we've had Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, but those players have been insanely productive. But I view Drake London very highly in this draft class. My number 1 player from Alabama, Jamison Williams, wide receiver, transferred from Ohio State to Alabama. Weighed in a little bit light at the NFL Combine at 191 pounds, 6'1.5", but tore his ACL, which is the big knock on Jamison Williams. But the production obviously is not a knock. You see this last year at Alabama when he finally got a chance to play. 79 receptions, 1,572 yards, almost 20 yards a catch, 15 touchdowns, and that's in the SEC. The kid was electric. When you watch the tape, he has transcendent speed. He is crazy fast, can make plays on the ball, can run pretty solid routes for how fast he is, and you don't have to be an excellent route runner when you contain the type of explosiveness and speed that he has. It's going to scare DBs off of him. It's going to give him space where he can run. He's going to scare you so much with the vertical. He can run that dig over the middle. He can run a slant. He can run a comeback. I view him as an absolute stud. If it wasn't for the ACL injury that he suffered, and that's why I think he weighed in a little bit low at 179 pounds. If he didn't have that injury, I think he played most of the season around 190 pounds, so I don't think you need to worry about him in the same way, DeVonta Smith coming out last season. But, I really have high hopes for Jameson Williams. If he is a guy that goes to the Chiefs or the Packers, will probably be my number 1 player in the rookie rankings. Obviously, a lot of that will be dependent on where he goes in the draft. But honestly, one of my favorite receivers, college tape I've ever watched. It's insane what he was able to do in his last season, and it's a shame that he went down because I'd love to see him right away in the NFL. As it is, we'll probably see him in November. But yeah, super excited for him, super excited for this NFL draft. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you made it to this point in the video, please hit that like button. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section down below. Like I told you guys, I'm going to be coming out post-NFL draft with my dynasty rankings with all these landing spots. Landing spots are going to be huge this year in this draft. Obviously, the running back is huge, and it will be even bigger this year, I think, with wide receivers than it ever has been before because of the type of draft capital some of these teams have at the end and how wide receiver needy some of these teams are. So yeah, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Thank you guys for watching. This has been Fantasy Joe. Until next time, I'll see you guys.